When I mention my dad's abuse, I usually mention salient things: physical pain, insults, and controlling behavior. Let me get out of here. Do you think Lily could beat Karatos in a debate, guys? Bro, can we just... use recommended browser settings. It wants to make Microsoft Edge my cute. Cute. Very nice. Very, very nice. Stop. When I mention my dad's abuse, I usually mention salient things: physical pain, insults, and controlling behavior. These are clearly bad. If I tell you he, if I tell that he, sorry. Wait, did I get dyslexia or she's mixed these words up, right? Okay, these words are mixed up. Oh my God. Okay, I thought it was just mine. If I tell you that he often told me I was lazy and failed horribly at life once I left home. Oh. Jesus, holy shit, hold on, my brain just fell apart. Oh my God. I'm having a stroke reading this. Okay. When I mention my dad's abuse, I usually mention salient things: physical pain, insults, and controlling behavior. These are clearly bad. If I tell you that he often told me that I was lazy and would fail horribly at life once I left home, you know it's bad because it's concrete, easy to imagine, and obviously unkind. But this wasn't the worst of the abuse. The most terrible parts were extraordinarily hard to understand or describe. In his world, I felt insane. I couldn't tell what was real, who was at fault, or why my heart hurt so much. My sense of clarity around my own intentions crumbled. Everything I thought or did might have seemed good on the surface, but that goodness became just a disguise for my true, darker intentions, all helpfully revealed to me by my dad. And none of it was salient or concrete or easily understandable. I remember my mom once telling me, "I can't describe what this is like to other people. The individual thing seems so silly, I can't put the important thing into words." I'm going to try to put into words, and the words I use for the important thing are frame control. This isn't just about my dad, and he wasn't even particularly good at it when children weren't his targets. Frame control pops up elsewhere. It's a feature of cults, leaders, of some charismatic people, of abusers in relationships, of some parents, of some ideological movements. It's hit communities around me, hurt friends of mine. I don't know how to fight it, but I at least want to name it, and naming it is really hard because at first glance, frame control looks like completely normal behavior. Every individual instance is not that bad, and when the knife that wounds you is invisible, you might doubt that you're bleeding at all. Frame control is inherently illegible. It's not something that checks for a few clear boxes, and it's only really visible through the experience of the receiver. In this post, I'm going to advocate for some perspectives that I think can be really dangerous. I'm going to avoid too many disclaimers or safety warnings throughout for the sake of directness, though I have some thoughts on danger at the end. Your frame is basically the set of assumptions you hold about the world around you. In every way there is: your values, your identity, your beliefs about meaning and social norms and economics and whatever, although most of it tends to be implicit or subconscious. Probably only a small portion of your frame is directly expressible. Your frame might encompass anything from "Jesus is my savior" to "it's bad to touch the sidewalk with your hands" to "I am valuable because I'm funny." Imagine your frame exists as a box around you. When someone engages with you, they try to get you out of your box and into their box in various ways. This can be via stuff like debate, trying to demonstrate through reason and facts how their box is better. No, sex isn't about power, it's about sex. Here's a study. Recommendation, showing that the box they're in has been really good for them. Viewing my body tension as actually about childhood trauma really cleared things up. Pressure, holding social alliance with them as conditional on them joining you in your box. I only really respect people who believe all lives matter. Rescue, offering up their box as a solution for an issue you have. Want to escape your suffering? Become aware of no self. And aggression, trying to push you into their box. You're a piece of shit for denying climate change. You're the reason we're all going to die. Is this whole thing the article? Oh my goodness, we're writing a lot here, huh? These are all attempts to control your frame, but none of these is what I mean by frame control. These techniques can be manipulative or abusive, but they're also broadcast clearly, in a similar way to how a man catcalling on a busy street alerts both the target and everyone else to their presence. It's annoying, but clearly legible. It's easy for you and everyone around you to say to each other, that person wants something from you, and to move on with your day. No, frame control is the man doesn't announce his presence, he just stalks you silently of the communication world. It's when you end up in the other person's box without knowing that it happened. It's not violence you can feel or coaxing you can reason with. It's a slow build of their frame around you until you don't remember what your box ever looked like. Frame control is a quiet subversion of your agency. Instead of offering up their frame for you to consider, they pull you in without consent into a world you probably would never have endorsed from the outside. Frame control often results in doubt, denial, or suppression of your own feelings, as the frame controller has you in their frame and exerts a huge amount of energy to keep you there. Your own experience is warped to align with that of the frame controller, especially, when this comes at cost to you. For a very simple, obvious example, not all of them are so obvious, my dad would sometimes command obedience in things that were very painful to obey. For example, permanently ending all contact with my best friend. This made me angry, but his frame treated my anger as a sign that I was sinful and corrupt, and I thus experienced my anger as a failure on my part. I would get angry and then feel guilty for being angry and spend a huge amount of effort suppressing the anger and trying to convince myself I felt grateful for how much my dad was putting into his parenting. How is frame control done in such a surreptitious way? Surely you would notice if someone was telling you it's your fault for feeling bad, right? Sometimes frame controllers will make high-risk moves that serve to alienate 98% of people and draw on the other 2%. My organization is going to save the world. It may be a crazy claim, but if you're one of the people who really believes it's possible to save the world, you might instead process the claim as instead incredibly brave. Because you know 98% of people will think it's stupid, and maybe it is brave. My point is not that the moves are good or bad, only that high-variance, high-risk moves will fail most of the time, but be very effective when they don't fail. This can make frame control strategies that fail on you seem to be very obvious and easy to avoid, but the frame control strategies that work will feel extremely exciting. This idea actually reminds me a lot of when like Karantos or other people will say things like, you know that Islam is good because my holy book hasn't changed since the dawn of mankind. That's a statement that's on its face, I think to a lot of reasonable people, is obviously absurd. Why would I want something that's unyielding and unchanging? It seems like it's not receptive to criticism or new information. But to some people, it's like, oh, I like the idea of there being an unchanging thing that said the same shit for 2,000 years. Seems like it's probably correct. Also, frame control is often more likely to happen to vulnerable people. If you're younger or alienated from family or don't have a great social group, or if you're very weird or neurotypical and don't feel easily seen, or if you end up in a system where your core needs are controlled by your compliance, romantic relationships and employment and MLMs can fit this makes you much more susceptible. Before I'm more direct about identifying frame control, I want to clarify a few things. One is that good frame controllers put a lot of effort into avoiding the appearance of control. They will explicitly say things that appear to validate your emotions and increase your degree of freedom. They might appear empathetic, self-reflective, open to negative feedback, genuinely caring. Skilled frame controllers track the quiet social understanding of how you have to act in order to be perceived as good, and they are very careful to fill this. See the dutiful inclusion of option C in this otherwise aggressive tweet. Oh, this reminds me of like MrGirl telling Lav, like, you don't have to leave though if you don't want to. What is this even about? 2021. Do you use these strategies? I just opt straight for the physical abuse. This causes the victims to justify all sorts of harmful behavior to themselves. Well, my boyfriend says he loves me and he wants what's best for me, so his punishment of my behavior must be good for me. Well, that person says they're open to being wrong and have pointed out when they were wrong before, so it's unlikely they're wrong about X. Frame controllers, typically after they get a good foothold, also can determine the standard by which you measure what is good. Instead of just replicating good behavior, they also tell you what good behavior is, such as correcting your sins is good or not giving what you want is good for you. The second point is a doozy, and it's that you can't look at intent when diagnosing frame control. As in, what do they mean to do should be held separate from what are the effects of what they're doing, which I know is counter to almost every good lesson about engaging with people charitably. Frame control is an effect. Very often, people who frame control will not be aware that this is what they're doing and have extensive reasoning to rationalize their behavior that they themselves believe. If you are close to a frame controller and squinting at them to figure out, are they hiding intent to control me? You will often find that the answer is no. Oh, this is true. This coincides with what I say about how, I think that people that engage in this type of manipulation, I don't think it's a super conscious, mapped out roadmap. It's just a thing that they kind of do because it worked. It works in terms of how they deal with people. I do it consciously. Okay, well, man, you really want to. This often functions as a trap to keep people in a controlled frame. For example, I once hung out for a while with a cult, which nobody, including me, viewed as a cult at the time. Oh shit, she's talking about DGG. Where their cult leader was doing a lot of really bad frame control stuff. The narrative inside the group, which is not universal across cults, was that the cult leader was both deeply flawed and perceptive, and the things he did that hurt people were either for their own good or an unintentional byproduct of him genuinely trying to do good. He means well was a crucial element of keeping people in this cult. American Nacho joined, focusing on his good intent function to dismiss and downplay the damage that was being done to its members. And so, when evaluating frame control, you have to throw out intent. The question is not, does this person mean to control my frame? The question is this person controlling my frame? This is especially true for diagnosing frame control that you're inside of, because the first defense a frame controller uses is the empathy you hold for them. This all might sound pretty dark, like I'm painting a reality where we might go around squinting at empathetic, open, caring people who have zero ill intent whatsoever and trying to figure out how they are actually bad. And this is kind of true, but if only because I am an empathetic, open, caring person with zero ill intent is exactly the kind of defense actual frame controllers inhabit. The vast majority of good people with good intent aren't doing any significant kind of frame control. My point is just that good person with good intent should not be considered a sufficient defense a sufficient defense if there seems to be other elements of frame control present. Much of frame control occurs in the land of things not said. We're constantly unconsciously making strategic moves in conversation that shift ourselves into more favorable positions. For example, you have a bad fight with your romantic partner and things are tense. Shortly after the fight, you and your partner are hanging out in a group of friends. Your partner suggests the group should set up a fund where everyone can contribute to group trips, and the excess in the fund can cover emergencies. You announce that this sounds like a great idea, that communal bonding is great. You publicly announce reinforcement of your partner's idea has a secondary function of aligning yourself with your partner and communicating to your partner that you're still affectionate despite the fight you just had. And maybe your partner responds that no, this isn't about communal bonding, this is about handling emergencies. Your partner's words were just clarifying their own meaning, but the secondary function is unaligning themselves with you, pointing out your understanding failure, and implying that the fight is still ongoing. On the surface, the conversation is normal, but other communication is also happening, likely without conscious knowledge of the participants. The above example is from a personal experience, and when it happened, I had zero conscious knowledge of the secondary functions. Conversation, action, and context are overflowing with secondary functions. Words have effects that aren't just about the words, and so we get things like greeting rituals, hello, how are you, I'm fine, how are you, designed to indicate alliance. I'm busy again means I don't want to date you. Telling the unattractive person they're beautiful just the way they are indicates that you are magnanimous and virtuous and value people for their inner spirit or whatever. We often hear these by gut instincts, feeling uncomfortable, feeling affectionate, calm, agitated. We instinctively know the kinds of things to say to communicate the right unspoken functions. We get weird feelings around some people even if we can't put a finger on it. Those examples are more obvious, but the vast majority are trivial. For example, if I tell my friend I can't talk right now, I'm about to run to a doctor's appointment, it's full of mundane implications. My priority right now is my doctor's appointment, not you. I'm taking time to tell you this. I want you to know about my life. I take care of my health. Health. Oh, fuck. Too much no jumper. Frame control heavily relies on apparently trivial secondary functions. Frame controllers will say very normal sounding things with trivial secondary functions that also happen to give them more power. For example, I was once visiting a tightly knit group where my presence was somewhat a threat to the leader. I was an outsider, and some people in the group respected me. At one point, while in a discussion about gender dynamics, the leader casually mentioned that if Aellas were a man, people would find her disgusting. This was plausibly a normal thing to say in context. He was known for saying hard truths, for having insights about gender, and to be fair, I was sitting there, sweaty, topless, and on acid. And I hadn't showered in a week. This was at Burning Man. But it also had the function of reframing respect for me as actually coming from attraction. With this sentence, it caused everybody listening to reevaluate their opinions about me, no doubt their own experience of liking what I had to say. It was also brilliant because it wasn't a direct accusation to or about me. He didn't say Aellas isn't worth listening to. It was framed as being about the people perceiving me. This then increased my barrier towards challenging him because I would have had to explicitly point out implications that would give him another foothold to resist. Or Aubrey de Grey's Facebook post. Aubrey de Grey is a high-profile man who was recently accused of harassment. He wrote a defense of his behavior in which he argues that the accusers are not at all malicious, but rather were deliberately set up by a third party who fed them disinformation. This has the effect of establishing Aubrey as more authoritative than the accusers. He can see the real guilty party, and his accusers cannot. It frames his accusers as innocent and mistaken victims, thus subverting their accusations as valid, and positions Aubrey as firmly determined to bring the true guilty parties to justice. Why would you oppose him if you want to pursue the guilty? Adrent, bro, I fucking jumped. Wait, what is this? Why the fuck did this person take out their eyes? Why would you censor your eyes? I'm so fucking confused. To hide their identity? Bro, it's you see the whole face. Jesus. Uh-oh. Oh, American Nacho again. What does this guy keep jumping in for? He's gang stalking you? The examples I'm giving are obvious, salient ones because they stood out and I remembered them. But most of the time, it's a quieter accumulation of 1,000 tiny implications, each one so small that to point one out would sound insane. It might be something like asking the frame controller if they want to go to the store with you, and they respond, "No thanks, because I went last time." A completely innocuous comment, but in the right context, it might be an implication that last time they went with you was doing you a favor and making a sacrifice. A lot of it is also not explicitly verbal. It could be how they say it, their body language, where they're placing their attention. Check mirror stream. Why? Mirasjuice.com. What is she selling?
Oh no. Oh no.
What? Her OnlyFans is mirasjuice.com? Pretty sure you're not allowed to link directly to that on your Twitch, but okay. Oh, she's got a flower hat on. How cute. I can't believe you wouldn't invite her. My best friend, Mira. Okay. It's for Midsummer? Oh my god. Did she just talked. I just thought she was behind me. Okay, no more Mira. I just had a schizo attack. Holy shit. Of course, everybody does things that I could recount here and assign a frame control frame to it. We constantly manipulate each other, asking implicitly to be viewed as competent or kind or insightful. And maybe it's good to pay closer attention to this too, but the difference is between this everyday thing and the frame control that traumatizes people is generally that of intensity, frequency, and practical control. If it occurs regularly and in a direction that consistently reduces trust in your own mind, it hands the frame controller power over your reality and devotion. And if this is backed up with credible threats to your needs, social acceptance, income, etc., then I'm much more likely to give it a frame control label. I provide examples of what's not frame control later. If you try to point out the secondary effects, frame controllers typically have a more advanced version of the "it's just a joke" defense. Why are you taking such a normal thing in such an uncharitable light? What issues do you have that are causing you to be so resistant? If this happens in a culture of intense self-improvement where people are used to finding actual insights by investigating their own resistance to things, this can be a very effective tactic because it's a question that points to a legitimately useful direction. There is always something interesting going on in your own experience. Parallels are drawn to sympathetic situations. For example, perhaps once you finally established a necessary boundary for your own good in a relationship with someone you cared about, and this person got agitated and accused you of making them feel bad and limiting their self-expression. This is unfortunate, but you believe with your whole being that this person really should investigate their own resistance to your boundaries. And thus, investigate your resistance is a powerful and well-known rule that people widely agree with, and this is why it's so effective as a frame control defense. The problem is, if your goal is to end your suffering, and the actual best way to end your suffering is to change your circumstances, then investigate your own resistance is a distraction. It's a frame where your circumstances are not considered as a changeable option. A related strategy is pushing the painful update button. I'm sure you've had experiences where you learned and grew, and it was really painful to do so. You had to face some hard truths, let go of how you saw yourself, and maybe even do a bit of surrendering of your ego. This is legitimately good, but a key aspect of frame control is reframing harm as good, and so the pain from beneficial updates becomes an easy candidate. You might be promised insights about yourself, usually handed to you by the frame controller, and pain from those insights gets reinterpreted as evidence that the insights are valuable. No pain, no gain. This also tends to be more common in meditation communities where they might encourage things like very hard work or lack of sleep or no food. What, did you think growth was going to feel good? The norm is whispered from every corner. The pain you feel from this community and its leaders is what growth means. And to be clear, a lot of this is true. Frame control breaks your reality down to fit another one, and while I view this as poisonous, the act of breaking down your frame can have huge benefits, similarly to how forcing a child to sit through school might break their creativity, but give them the ability to reliably perform boring tasks. When I first started doing LSD, I recognized a lot of parallels between the drug and my upbringing. Oh, this is the same thing, I told my sister, who was tripping with me that first time. Dad broke us in the same way, he just did it violently. Being mentally broken by an abuser was super educational. It annihilated my sense of fight. It taught me to surrender, how to handle huge amounts of pain without resistance, and how to let go of everything I loved. And in LSD, though a vastly different tone and infinitely more healthy, I somehow encountered the same basic story. This is part of the reason why escaping frame control situations can be so disorienting. Frame control situations can give you legitimate, valuable insight. It can open up deep, tender parts of your soul. You might genuinely love the frame controller. It can be some of the most meaningful experiences you've ever had. The basic story is a good one. It's just that the goal of frame control is someone else's power over you. The story is infused with poison. They grant you profound awe in exchange for serving them. And the combination of valuable insight at the level of your soul, mixed in with poison and subjugation to someone else's will, can be a deeply traumatizing experience. People who escape frame control situations often have a really hard time making sense of the world or themselves, or what is good or bad, or how they feel, or how to feel. Their own sense of self, their own sense of judgment has been undermined so thoroughly that they don't trust themselves to hold their own frame anymore. Zoe Kersey, who worked at Leverage, says a key confusing feature of leaving is that you weren't acknowledging the badness and now you have to. And for a while, the badness is all-consuming because it's the main thing you weren't allowed to acknowledge while maintaining your relationship to the community or person controlling you. But something about this is also fucky for sense-making because it doesn't acknowledge the powerful soul insights. But if you acknowledge only those, you'll never leave. So the extremes create a yo-yo in recovery that often makes sense-making and integration an extremely long process, possibly never finished, very incoherent along the way. If Chad hasn't caught on, Aellas probably sent this to Destiny as a critique of Redacted. Kind of. A lot of it has to relate to him. I think if I look at things through this lens, I think it also I'll suck myself up, I guess. I think this is also why I have so much fun, like, dealing with crazy people and crazy conversations sometimes. Like, I feel like I have a very intuitive understanding of other people trying to, like, shift or mold me during a conversation, and I am very confident about, like, my own, to use Aellas language, my own frame. I'm not about to be, like, mind-fucked by somebody because they are trying to subtly move me in a direction, so it's kind of interesting to see what kind of insights they can pull out of me or what interesting things they can bring to a conversation, because I can recognize those, like, positives, but I'm not going to be, like, sucked into the all-consuming vortex that is them trying to, like, control my brain, which I think is something MrGirl super tries to do, and Lav kind of tries to do. MrGirl, though, probably had to spend a lifetime kind of, like, reinforcing or refining this, not intentionally, but it just happens, whereas Lav is just a pretty narcissistic woman that kind of does it automatically. Wouldn't this make you more likely to do this to other people, even if by accident? I don't think so. I don't think so for two reasons. One, I tend to be pretty live and let live for most people. Like, if I have any problem with a person, I would say that my general problem is usually that I let go too easily. I'll do this with, like, cutting ties with friends. I'll do this if I feel like somebody's talking shit about me. I'll just, you know, just stop talking to them. Also, my conflict resolution strategy tends to be really avoidant. So if I'm having an issue with somebody, I'm more likely to just, like, say fuck it and not talk to them rather than actually, like, come forward to, like, resolve a conflict. I think that these two things, if I was to be a manipulator, hurt my manipulation style. They're things that I would have to dramatically improve upon. If I thought you had a problem with me, then I would seek to go and resolve that, probably do it in a pretty aggressive manner because I'd want to, like, change your mind about me. I think that those things lend themselves better to manipulative behavior. Also, I don't consider myself a manipulative person in my 30s. In my late 20s, I don't think so. Yeah, but any manipulator would say that, huh? Why would any who do that actually say yes? Why even ask us that? Well, I said no, but then I give you a justification, so I'm gonna gang stalk you, buddy, okay? Who was that? Why they said there were 20 minutes? Oh, there's still Carantos and American Nacho in my room. I'm just muted right now. In a lot of ways, this is similar to an abusive upbringing. As a child, you bond tightly with a parent who teaches you, cares for you, and molds your reality. You rely on them, and many wonderful things you value came from your relationship with them. So how do you come to terms with a world without them? Do you remember RP Stovall? I think so, right? Crazy guy in chat? Was he the actual schizo that we convinced we were talking directly to? I'm talking a bit philosophically about frame control, but in an attempt to get more concrete. Here's a non-exhaustive list of some frame control symptoms. Keep in mind that these are not the same thing as frame control itself, they're just red flags. Some of these overlap strongly with traditional cult signifiers. Also, not all frame control has all of these. They do not demonstrate, number one, they do not demonstrate vulnerability in conversations, or if they do, it somehow processes as still invulnerable. They don't laugh nervously, they don't give tiny signals that they are malleable and interested in conforming to your opinion or worldview. I once had a long talk with a very smart man who was widely perceived as deeply compassionate and kind, but after the talk I realized at no point in the conversation he'd indicated being impacted by my ideas, despite there being multiple opportunities for him to make, at the very least, small acknowledgments that I was onto something good. It took me a long time to realize this because he'd started out the conversation by framing me as special, telling me it was unusual to find someone else who had the ideas I did, and that I must have taken a very different path. He is someone who respects me was the frame he set up, and so I was blinded to the stark lack of reinforcement or vulnerability he actually displayed. That's me. She's talking about me. They have status and power. Number two, this is also about me. A key component that makes frame control dangerous is when it's linked to concrete consequences. Maybe people really respect them. Maybe they control resources. Maybe they are the person throwing big events. Maybe they gave you a new name. Maybe they have the power to exclude you from the social group. Less powerful people can also do frame control, but it tends to be tighter, such as only in a romantic relationship. The first point is exactly what happened with Brittany, by the way. Wait, what? Oh, yeah, maybe a little bit. Finger trap beliefs. Number 3. My term for beliefs where pulling against the belief only strengthens the belief. One example is how Christians say that Satan will make you doubt the existence of God. If you find yourself doubting the existence of God, this gets processed as evidence for Satan. Similarly, frame controllers will instill belief designed to clamp down if you ever doubt the frame controller. Other people will try to tell you that we're misguided because they're too afraid of our power, results in, if I entertain the notion that the leader's misguided, does this mean that I'm too afraid of their power? Frame controllers will often reframe ideas that challenge them as red flags that point to deeper flaws in the questioner. Often these defenses are established well in advance of the challenging idea so that your mimetic immune system gets disabled long before it has a chance to get activated. Number 4, reframing harm is beneficial. I discussed this earlier, but to reiterate, in normal life we have self-protection instincts that tell us to run away from things that hurt. We also have norms where we're taught not to do this. Spending your childhood sitting in school might suck, but it's for your own good. So we accept it, which is bad in my opinion. Frame controllers use our prior understanding that sometimes things I don't like are good for me, and they make sure to map this onto everything about the frame controller that you don't like. Your pain, through one narrative or another, is evidence of goodness. Destiny, mimetic immune system. I wanted to talk to you about that specifically. Scribble. Okay, in the future, we will, my friend. Number 5, sometimes when your pain is processed as evidence of goodness, you often stop processing it as pain entirely. If you've ever looked back on a period of your life with shock that you could have handled that, likely this is because you viewed the harm as beneficial and thus did not process it as pain at all. This is often actively reinforced by frame controllers who inhabit a worldview where it's just not an option that a thing might be causing you pain. Number 6, they are the teacher and you are the student. This might make perfunctory. I think it's perfunctory.
Perfunctory.
Yeah. This might make perfunctory gestures towards leaning from you, but the general attitude upheld by them and also the culture around you is that knowledge passes from them to you. Unlike in traditional teaching, this usually extends to all things. They're uncomfortable with you holding subcategories of expertise and will tolerate it only insofar as they can take credit for your power in some way or maintain a narrative where they have the ability to ultimately judge the value or role of what you are presenting. This is me with my orbiters. Some of them might be successful, but it's because I made them. They might take steps to keep you in a position of student, such as deliberately giving you tasks you're bad at or placing you in situations that make you deeply uncomfortable, with good-for-you explanations included, of course, like when I made Lav debate other people. Insofar as they grant you actual authority, it will only be after they're convinced of your absolute unfailing loyalty. Number 7, a belief in their own importance. They often feel they have unique access to some knowledge that you can only get through them, whether it be religious or mystical or a complete theory of psychology. Number 8, a refusal to affirm ways in which your frame falls outside of theirs. In healthier relationships, people tend to approach each other's frames, as in, set aside their own worldview for a moment, inhabit the other person's, and talk to them from that frame. Frame controllers don't do this. They do not come to you. They do not acknowledge or validate your frame. There might be some performative aspects of this. For example, saying, I know this is so hard, while the rest of their speech subtly doesn't seem to indicate they actually understand that it's hard. Number 9. When conflicts or disagreements happen, they operate from an assumption that you simply haven't seen the light yet. They might be very magnanimous about this, or listen to you for a long time, or say things like, that's a great point, but their attitude seems to imply that there's not actually a possible reality where you are correct. They are gently, caringly waiting for you to realize the thing that they knew all along. They are so helpful. They are so patient as they help you to see the one truth. And if they have seen the one truth, how many other things are they right about that you simply can't see yet because you haven't tried hard enough? Can you express how this is different or unique from emotional abuse/manipulation? Why is there value in frame control conceptually as opposed to the current standards of abuse/manipulation we understand? And our research that ostensibly already cover the issues brought up in this post. I think that I think something that this report, something this is kind of getting at is that the way that really manipulative people control you is through a whole bunch of secondary or implied meanings and statements that make it that make it like just it's a very difficult situation to navigate. Because why is it so difficult to navigate? I think it's difficult to navigate because we have I think 95% of people agree on these kind of implied or secondary meanings, and then a smaller percentage of people can kind of manipulate these meanings in ways that are a little bit foreign or alien, and they can use it to very subtly kind of gain control over your understanding of yourself or your understanding of the world. There are I'm trying to think of examples. there are like, there are so many ways that you can like subtly undermine somebody's, we'll say somebody's appearance, right? Like, fuck. I should like think of this beforehand. But like, we could go down levels of how to undermine somebody's appearance, right? So on number one, like the most surface level thing is we could tell somebody you're ugly, okay? You're ugly. I don't like the way you look, right? That might be a way to do it. When you say somebody's ugly and you mean they're ugly, then it's pretty, there's like the implied meaning is the express meaning, right? It's not much, right? Another way to do this in a pretty blatant way is saying that like, oh, you don't look as pretty as X, okay? I wish you looked nice like Samantha. I wish you did your hair like her. I wish you wore clothes like her, right? That might be a way to do it, right? Past this level though, we can start to get into way more subtle digs at somebody. Maybe this is like, you don't compliment your partner that often, but you remark to them, oh, look, I really like the way X looks. Or something that's even a little bit more insidious. You might say, don't you like the way X looks? It might not seem like there's much of a difference, but once you've moved into this sort of conversation style, if you hit somebody with these things for long enough, these 3s and 4s, you can fuck with somebody's mind in a really dramatic way. You're constantly undermining their sense of self. You're constantly undermining the way that they feel they look, but you're never really saying anything direct that can ever be called out, right? Like, let's say that I'm around a bunch of girls and I'm constantly saying this to like a girlfriend or my wife, right? If at some point she says to me like, hey, what is she even gonna say? I don't like it when you say you like the way she looks. I wish you complimented me more. Okay, oh yeah, you look pretty too, of course. I wish that you wouldn't ask me if I like the way other people like. Like you can't really fight any of these statements. You kind of sound crazy. Like what are you actually gonna say here? And I think this is where it's beneath this line where really fucky statements happen, where somebody can constantly and incessantly and insidiously imply something in a very subtle manner with these kind of secondary implied meanings, but there's never a single thing that you can point to. And I think that days, weeks, or months or years of this type of needling can like destroy somebody's sense of self. Because I think what happens is over time, they end up developing a whole bunch of really negative feelings about themselves, but they don't actually understand why or where it's coming from, because you're not really saying anything bad. They just know that like somehow the things you're saying kind of make them feel bad. But if you ever go to them to directly address this, and you're probably assuming, if it's like a relationship person, you're probably assuming they're working in good faith. You wouldn't think your like boyfriend or girlfriend is trying to mind fuck you, right? But when you go to them, if they're a little bit aware that this is kind of what they're doing, then they can start like subtly moving you in another direction, and you might not even realize it, right? Like I notice that you're always like complimenting like these people. Like what is it about them that you like so much? It's like, oh, I don't know. I really like it when girls do their hair like this, right? I think that when a girl does her hair like this, I think that it shows she like really cares about her appearance, you know? And yeah, and it's like, okay, fuck, like. Well, fuck, like, shouldn't you be doing that then? Like, they're telling you constantly, they're asking if you like the way these people look. You do like the way these people look. They're telling you that they think that that's an indication of how they take care of their parents. Well, then you should probably be doing it, right? And you can start, and this is just over something as stupid as looks, right? This could be done with like, sex is a really good area where you can navigate through using a bunch of these kind of like double meaning statements as well, you know, where you can say things and very subtly apply other things, but you're not like directly instigating an interaction or antagonizing the person, but you can make these like really undercutting like statements, you know. Destiny, oh God, and then say, no, I'm not trying to get you to change your look, and then you feel crazy. Yeah, stuff like that, basically. Yeah. Okay, hold on, fuck. How would you attack it without sounding like MrGirl meta convo? This is the really hard one. Do you ever do shit like this? No, I try to be hyper aware of these types of comments. I am hyper ultra. I don't know why, but I know the secondary meanings for all of this stuff really well, and I try to avoid. I'm not perfect, but I try to avoid it. I think this is why when I get into so many different conversations and shit, why I start to feel a little bit crazy when people say things about like, oh well, why do you think this person said something? Why do you think they thought that was that mean or whatever? And it's like in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, I know if I said this or that, it would be super mean. I know if I called this person a cuck, if I called this person fat, if I made fun of this or whatever, I know that would be like, I know these underlying perceptions, but it seems like a lot of people don't all the time. Oh, fuck. I had a specific example to go along with that. Oh, how would you attack it without sounding like a Mr. Girl meta convo? I think that the reason why I think something that helps me is I'm not usually looking to other people for frames, I guess. Like, I have my frame for how I view things. I can tell when people are trying to needle me, and as soon as I see it, it's just very funny to me. So, like if a girl is getting, like, jealous in a conversation or some shit like that, like if she's saying, like, oh, it sounds like you're busy tonight. Like, I guess maybe we can talk tomorrow if there's enough time for me. Like, I'll probably message back like, oh, maybe. It'll depend on how many girls I'm seeing. Like, I'll just say some shit like, because like, I'm not retarded. And then they'll be like, well, what do you mean by that? Why are you getting so mean? It's like, I'm not a fucking retard. I know what the fuck you're trying to say. Like, what you think I'm fucking retarded? But that's because like, I'm very confident of my assessment of the world, my assessment of myself. I'm not about to be undermined by anybody else because I'm not looking to somebody else for like guidance or frame or narrative or anything else. I understand myself. I understand my narrative. I'm not looking to other people for validation. But if somebody's looking to me, or if you're looking to somebody else for validation, which is probably more normal. I'm probably an outlier there because I'm so fucking based Chad just because of my upbringing or whatever. But like if you're a more normal person, you're leaning into other people for like validation and stuff, then yeah, it probably makes you more susceptible to these types of manipulative tactics, I think. Okay. Yeah, except apparently I don't know the implicit things when it comes to balcony watching, apparently. True. People also kind of do this in a reverse way, as in they use the opposite kind of statements to fish for compliments. Oh, sure, you could. Yeah. Yeah, and if you're not following the implied meanings, you can say some really retarded shit. Like when girls say shit like, do you think she looks pretty? But then in that case, usually a guy will pick up immediately like, no, of course not. She never looks as good as you, right? A lot of this has oh god, fuck. I wonder if I saved it to my account. I don't think I did. There's a lot of posts that get written in like the relationship subreddit or in the sex subreddit where people will sometimes make these killer relationship like faux pas. They'll just say the dumbest thing. I didn't save this. Nope. Fuck. Oh. Fuck. I'm trying to remember what it was. But like, there are like a couple of things, like referring to past partners as having like huge dicks or bigger dicks, like things like that are obviously horrible. But I don't know if they fit into this conversation. But they're like stupid things that you can say like that, and then all of a sudden you're. But okay. Isn't there an element of perception bias? If you miss an analysis, then you don't know you missed it? Maybe? I don't know what that sentence means. Okay. Fuck, hold on. I need to finish this. It's fucking late. Number 11, they orient around their turf. They prefer to decide location and method of debates. They want you to come to their house. Maybe they sit while you stand. Maybe they don't give interviews with anybody slightly hostile. Maybe they want you to come on their show and frame it as evidence of wrongdoing if you decline. Number 12, they consistently reroute pressure away from them. I once sat in on a dojo where I watched one of the students point out an error that the teacher had made. The teacher then responded by asking the student a question that investigated what was behind the pointing out. What was really about them that caused this? The resulting discussion then was entirely about the student, and as far as I can tell, everybody else forgot about the mention of the error. My dad used to refer to this tactic explicitly. Make sure they're always on the defensive. Don't give them room to have energy for offense. This is what happens when you guys make the misspeak memes, because you know I'm about to fucking nail you down on some dumb shit, and then you try to get me with the misspeak. Number 13, similar to the above, they ask questions with forced answers. A common tactic in police interviews, when explicit, did you leave your dish in the sink? You know that I don't like that, right? You left your dish in the sink knowing I don't like it, right? So you admit you're intentionally upsetting me. Sometimes it's less explicit. For example, once I was at a large group dinner with acquaintances and a man I didn't like. He was talking about something I wasn't interested in, mostly to a few other people at the table, and I drifted to looking at the ceiling. The man then said loudly, "Oh, looks like I'm boring Aellas." This put me into a position where I had to choose between either being honest about being bored and drastically escalating the social tension, or to politely disagree and thus lend social validation to what he was doing. Number 14, they make buried claims, assertions that pressure you to jump through hoops to challenge the core. For example, everybody knows you're sensitive, asks you to challenge everybody knowing before you can challenge being sensitive. If you angrily ask them to stop opening your door without knocking, they might say annoyance is understandable. It comes from a desire for privacy instilled into you by an isolated society. If you want to tell them your annoyance is important, now you have to argue for an isolated society or that it's not caused by society. One of the things that annoys me about like the Lav, mainly the Lav stuff right now, because I think MrGirl is, largely moved on or is in the process of moving on. One thing that annoys me about Lav is that she will say, here's something that I firmly believe is true. If you repeat, I'm either about to invent a really fucking tip-tippy smart quote, or I'm pretty sure this is already a quote. But like, isn't there a quote like, a falsehood repeated often enough becomes the truth? that's gotta be a quote, right? If Lav goes on to stream after stream after stream, and she just kind of says shit, like, that's a Hitler quote, based. She just kind of says things over and over and over again. Eventually, I think people are just going to kind of take it for granted. Like, yeah, Destiny was like really creepy with a lot of women. Yeah, Destiny did do this thing. I noticed that even within my own community, not to instigate anything, it kind of sort of happened with the Anna stuff, where a lot of that has gotten almost rewritten to where it's like, oh yeah, Destiny was just like mean to her for absolutely no reason for like 2 years. And it's like, no. Anna streamed about me almost every single day for like 18 months. How was that part always forgotten or never mentioned? Why does nobody mention this? Who said this, Destiny? That's said all the time in MrGirl subreddit, and I see it crop up quite a bit in my subreddit. Or just other claims will be repeated about me. Destiny's retaliatory. Oh, one thing that I set up is, I don't know if she includes it in an example here, but there's a way to preempt opposition to your statements in a way that defangs your opponent so they can never say anything. For example, one of the things I said that MrGirl and Lab set up for me is Destiny is highly retaliatory, and he refuses to accept criticism. With these two statements laid out, anytime I try to contradict anything they say, all I'm doing is further proving that I am highly retaliatory and I can't take criticism. It's like you go up to somebody and say, you seem like the kind of person that would get really mad if somebody criticized you. You're really fucking stupid, aren't you? And it's like, yeah, oh shit. It's like, it's a really mindfucky kind of like tactic to maneuver around. Not necessarily in a one-on-one situation, but in a public situation, because publicly it can be very, very, very effective, you know? Okay, 15. They constantly redirect to salient measures. This is a very classic example with abusive parents when they point out how they're feeling, when they point out how they're feeding and clothing you as an appeal to being a good parent. Why are you trying to tell them about a confusing, vague, bad feeling when they're doing all of these concrete things correctly? Number 16, a refusal to collaborate with other perspectives. Most interactions have a normal push-pull power, usually designed to distribute it evenly throughout the group. An obvious, simple example is responding to a compliment with a self-effacing joke. I think that's how you pronounce that. In this regard, frame controllers are antisocial rather than cooperative. They don't participate with the group in evenly distributing power. They subvert other perspectives in service of their own power. So if frame control looks so similar to just being a normal person, what are some signs that someone isn't doing frame control? Keeping in mind that these are pointers, not absolute, and not doing these doesn't mean someone is doing frame control. Okay. Number 1, they give you power over them, like indications that they want your approval or unconditional support in areas that you are superior to them. They signal to you that they are vulnerable to you. Oh, this is interesting because in some ways, this is actually a really good manipulative tactic. I think I brought this up before. If you're ever having trouble, or if you want to get somebody to like you really fast in the office, the coldest, meanest motherfucker, if you've got a problem with a project and you go to somebody for help, anytime you go to a person for help, especially with somebody you have an iffy relationship with, you look so good in their eyes by saying like, hey, can you help me with this? You're really good at this, right? Holy shit, is a huge ego boost to them. Super easy way to get somebody to be friendly towards you. Number 2, you feel really deeply loved by them. Frame controllers often say they love you or have demonstrations of love like loyalty, but often lack a subtle, profound attention and selfless care. For example, both my mom and dad made terrible parenting mistakes and both said they loved me, but I could feel the selfless care from my mom, but I had to grapple with what love meant from my dad. This is true. You should listen to your feelings and your gut a lot. I think your gut and your feelings are pretty important. Like, if you're feeling really, I think that's probably one of the most important things. If you constantly feel like shit around somebody, except for me, if you constantly feel like shit around somebody, you should probably stop and think like, what the fuck is going on here? You know? Hey, Destiny, can you teach me piano? Yeah, sure. Send me pics of your mom. Number 3, they repeatedly validate your reality wholeheartedly without subtle implications otherwise, and even when they don't agree, they defer to you as an authority on yourself. Number 4, acceptance. In a sense, they view you as perfect the way you are. They assume your hidden intentions ultimately come from a place of deep goodness. While you might be attempting to fix things about yourself and they might be down to help, they carry an attitude that you are fundamentally okay. Number 5, you don't have to justify your preferences. While they might inquire about them, they respect what you want even if you don't understand why, even if it seems irrational, even if you have no idea why. Your wants are tweeted to everybody to see. Your wants are treated as fundamentally valid regardless of what generated them. Frame control is damaging when it's invisible. If you're fully aware of it, it might affect you similarly to how most normal salient attempts to move frames do, like debating or persuasion. For this reason, I don't think all frame control is inherently harmful. It's possible, for example, to be close friends with a heavy frame controller while being fully aware of all the frame control moves they might be doing. I think this is really hard to achieve, though. Being very close with someone almost by default means vulnerability to each other's frames. When you want to get their world, empathize with them, see things the way they do, and especially if you respect them, this is how the frame control slips through. And this is why my general philosophy for people who frame control is burn it with fire. I don't have time, or I don't have this for any other human flaw. People with terrible communication skills, traumatized people who lash out, anxious, needy people who will try to soak the life out of you, furious, dox-prone people on the internet. I believe there's an empathetic route forward. Not so with frame control. Frame control uses the pathways of love, desire to do good, and empathy, or of any sort of human connection. Pushing the painful update button is effective because people generally want to grow. Finger trap beliefs snap shut because you were shown, such as, e.g. Is e.g. for example? I think e.g. is for example, or i.e. i.e. is such as, or e.g. I don't remember. It might be such as, e.g. might be such as. Finger trap beliefs snap shut because, such as, you were shown just how much the outside world persecutes this person. Oh, e.g. is by example, fuck me. And you are genuinely moved to be the one who shows them true kindness. You look for their human intent, you imagine what it's like to be them, you empathetically step into their world, and then it clamps down around you. In this, I am a conflict theorist. This is not a mistake, this is war. And a part of me knows that this isn't true, as in, I couldn't have been born into a brain that ended up doing strong frame control. I know they are real people with feelings and needs, but that true perspective will let them destroy you. When I run into strong frame control, I snap to an extremely antagonistic frame. No, you are not allowed into my life, my home, my friends, and I will try to remove you from the power you might use to hurt anybody else. Maybe I'm being overly dramatic about this because I'm more vulnerable to frame control than most, but another part of me simply doesn't care. They will use your fear of being overly dramatic to undermine your reality. Aellas still doesn't know I'm controlling her. Breaking out of frame control is a really high cost. In cults, this is often clear. You lose your community or financial support or whatever, but the cost can also be internal. With frame control, you have to decide between two worlds. They are normal and I am bad, and they are fucked up and I am sane. And if they are fucked up, you have to be able to believe that you need to separate from them to cut them off from you fully. This is really hard to do. For a normally empathetic person, the idea that someone could be so confused as to be harmful that I have literally no idea how they could be healthfully allowed close to me or the people I love is very, very tragic. What is this fucking sentence? I literally have no idea how they could be healthfully, is that a real word, healthfully? Or is it healthily? Healthfully allowed close to me or people I love is very, very tragic. It's a real word now. Part of the motivation for inhabiting a world where anybody you love can be saved is that this means that you yourself might be savable. I have a wonderful friend who often invites questionable people to parties, and I suspect it's because he views himself as questionable, and demonstrating inclusion of other questionable people is a way of demonstrating to himself that he will also be included. We want unconditional love and acceptance to be possible because we want it for ourselves, and so subtly ejecting someone else is a destruction of that possibility. It means someone can be so bad that they're ejected out into the dark, and you have to stand there staring at the decompression chamber as you press the button to open the door into space. It's brutal and it hurts and it's terrifying. Who are you that you could do that to someone else? And who are you that you could know your ship is surrounded by space? A lot of things I'm pushing in this post are pretty dangerous. I'm handing you a label of frame control and giving you permission to cut off empathy, to stop investigating your own motivations, to squint super hard at possible subtle motivations in others, to stop looking at intent and only look at effect. This is basically the opposite of all good advice, and even worse, it seems like it might give you a license to use frame control as a weapon, not just on others, but also ourselves. Technically, everybody frame controls all of the time. Does the things I outline as bad. And people who frame control may also accuse others of frame control as a weapon for sowing self-doubt and dismiss accusations of frame control at themselves as simply weapons for sowing seeds of self-doubt. I don't know how to address this problem. This is partially because it's a moving target. As soon as frame control is named and described, then it can get good-hearted. Frame controllers will use this as an instruction manual to become less visible. It's also because frame control exists as a subversion of normal behavior. As the salient stuff is labeled bad, they stop doing the salient stuff. All the bad gets squeezed down into the cracks below our feet. And now you can't tell which parts of the floor are poisoned just by looking at it. And if we manage to point at a spot and label the poison, it becomes salient and the whole process starts again. If someone tries to use this blog post to argue for someone doing frame control that you don't see, it's okay to still be skeptical. If they try to use it to argue that someone isn't doing frame control, but you still feel a weird unsettledness that you can't name, it's okay to still feel unsettled. Don't let this post tell you how you should feel. Take this article lightly. Take it as a pointer. Take it as art. Take this as frame control, take this as a frame itself that you can choose to look through and put down if it's not serving you. Ultimately, checking in with how you actually feel is the answer. I don't mean to imply this is easy. It's often really hard to know how you feel, and maybe it changes often, and frame controllers put in a lot of effort to obfuscate this. But in the end, careful attention to your own sensations are your saving grace.